Welcome to the third episode of Conversation with Authors by Bookbar. We are at Prabhat Road, which is Bookbar Mini, a new location for our conversation. So bear in mind the ambient sounds because we are right in the middle of the entire space. And for our third episode, we have a very distinguished guest, Manjiri Khandekar. I usually avoid introducing the guest because every guest we've had dons many hats and like a multi super talented. So, a brief on what she does. She owns Heritage India Communications. She's going to talk more about it. And she's the conceptualizer, visualizer, the whole soul of this book called as Punyakatha, which we are going to talk about in detail. I'm very excited to know what this book is all about. I have briefly read it, and since I have been born and brought up in Pune, it is something which is for every Punekar to take home and to understand what the city is and the soul of the city. And couldn't be more happy to have a conversation with you. So let's start by just briefly. You can introduce what you're doing, what you do, and then we'll structure the conversation accordingly.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Avnish, for inviting me here. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here in this very young place. So, briefly, I did my education from St. Xavier's College in Bombay in ancient Indian culture and history. That's where the passion for heritage actually was born.
Right.
And I followed it up with a diploma in mass communications.
Right.
But at that time, I did not have too much of an opportunity to follow it up. I got married, had kids. But I was very fortunate to be married to an army officer. And the heritage that we had studied about, I saw it living across the country. So there was a nascent dream of doing something more concrete with heritage. And I got the opportunity later in life.
Right.
Yeah.
So you actually studied this. Where did all like during your younger years? Did you get exposed to the cultural aspects of our country? Was that something which was there within your family? What got you to study what you studied, or was it just something which just happened?
No, I was always interested in history, and yes, the intercultural environment I grew up in did motivate me a bit. But what was the most inspiring thing was when I went to college. Uh, St. Xavier's at that time had a special department for ancient Indian culture and history, and the history culture of our country that we were taught was an India that I had never seen or read before, in spite of having done history throughout school. So that was where the inspiration came from. That America can come up with a National Geographic after 200 years of history, and we have 7,000 years of history, and nobody really knows anything about it.
Right.
So I wanted to do a Heritage India right then, but it materialized 20 years later.
So in school, we all have been taught the very British Mughal history, and
Correct.
you're saying that Saint Xavier's kind of went into a very different direction to really deep dive into what this country has to offer, and that really opened your mind to be able
Correct.
to understand the subject
Because they
even
had a
better.
department dedicated to ancient India.
Right. So that was your inspiration to start Heritage
Absolutely,
India.
absolutely.
And when you say you married an army officer,
Yeah, yeah.
what happened? Like, did you travel everywhere, or how did
Yeah.
that inspire you more to actually come to this point where you decided, okay, I just want to do this in my life?
So I have lived in 12 states in the country. Lived, which means I have spent more than just a few weeks as a tourist. I have lived and absorbed the places, and sometimes we moved 2, 3 houses within the same place. And every time we were posted to a place, we also traveled. Like for example, when my husband was posted in Bangalore, we traveled across the whole coastline of Kerala, Tamil Nadu. So I saw that what heritage we read about in some books sometimes is actually living everywhere, all nooks and corners of the country.
Right. So
In
you,
terms of temples, sculptures, in terms of traditions, rituals, dress, food, it's just all there.
right,
So, what is the most unique factor of our heritage is that India is one of the very few countries in the world where heritage exists in continuity.
right,
I mean, there were ancient civilizations like the Mesopotamian, Egyptian, but they've had a rupture. Nothing of that old culture exists anymore. But we still have, I mean, what our mythology talks about, we still have those pujas, we still dress up in saris, we still have a lot which is still existing.
right. So when did you start Heritage India?
2007.
2007, right? And Heritage India, as in our conversations, you've mentioned you all have done magazines, you all do walks, tours, thought leadership on educating people about what you've learned and what you've kind of discovered in your travels and in your um, experiences, right? So I want to come back to this aspect of the importance of knowing our culture. We'll come a little later to this because it's a very interesting aspect which I want to understand, and the missing gap between like what today's generation the knowledge is there but the connect may not be there,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah.
how do you kind of bridge that from having not just knowledge but also a feeling of pride and a connect with the roots of our country? So we'll come back to that, but
Okay.
let's circle back to what we are here for, which is Punyakatha.
Okay.
And firstly, I have so many questions about this. Are you from Pune? You're
Yeah,
born
I was
and brought
born
up
in
from Pune, right?
I'm
So
not brought up in Pune in that sense, but I'm born in Pune.
yeah. So what made you want to do something like this?
So, since heritage is my passion and I'd been doing it for a number of years, when we came to coffee table books, the obvious choice was something on Pune because this is a city where I have been born, my entire family connect is here, and my later education and professional career in the sense that at some point in time I took up French and I was teaching at the university for a good 25 years. And so the whole parkour, as you say, has been in Pune. So Pune is the city closest to me. Also, Pune has something fantastic to offer to the whole world. I mean, there is no city in the world that, I'm not exaggerating, I'm very sure about what I'm talking about, has the combination and the right mix of so many different elements in terms of education, in terms of industry, in terms of art and architecture, in terms of natural heritage. I mean, it's all here.
Right. So you put all of this into this book,
Yeah.
right? So I read a few chapters, and what really caught my attention is the way you have told the story. It's not a history book. Like while it talks about facts and it kind of gives you a beautiful journey right from the start of Pune being just a small civilization near the banks of the river to this very global city which we see today. Um, the way the story has been told is through 7 characters which are
Yeah.
children, and they kind of move from one era to the other and meet some protagonist of that era, and there is a dialogue and a conversation. Would you just talk us through the approach of telling the same story, because everyone's read a lot of
History
there's
of
so much
Pune.
content
Yeah.
out there, and sometimes content always like history sometimes gets a little boring. You don't have that emotional connect, but I think through this book what one can really expect is a very interesting emotional connect with the subject, and I think that's a very important way to tell a story. It's not just about putting facts, but it's also how those facts are expressed to the audience. So just walk us through how you conceptualize this, why these 7 children, why children in the first place, the different eras of what is there in your book, I'm sure even the audience here would love to know the creative process also behind all of this.
Yeah, so I'm so happy to hear you say this, that it's caught your interest, because that is the whole aim. It's very easy to, dream of something and want to tell it to the people, but it's no point just telling your story. You have to be very sensitive and conscious of whether that story is going to be listened to or absorbed. And when you are going to tell a story, you are very clear from the beginning that you are not bringing out a history book. You are going to tell the story of Pune.
Right.
So then, who is the audience? The first question comes is, who is the target audience? So if you are talking about Pune, why should it be restricted to a particular segment of society or age group or whatever? So it had to be a universal book. And now if you are going to bring out a universal book, how do you appeal to all ages and everybody at the same time? So it was a very tricky balance, but then we did a lot of brainstorming. Obviously it's not just me who's done the book, it's been a whole team who's worked hard and continuously to bring it together. So a lot of brainstorming sessions, and then we arrived at this concept that we could have a parallel thing going with a conversation with children and some excerpts which were specifically for a more keen interested reader.
So why children?
Because the children are the future of our
Right. So the children go back in time and kind of,
and
go through, discover.
because
Right.
basically children and you young people have to know about the see, our generation knows a lot and we grew up in that, but the young, like you said, there's a disconnect maybe. So that connect, the bridge building has to be done somewhere. And then we come back to this, that unless you know what you have, how are you going to take pride in it? And if you don't take pride in it, why are you going to look after it?
Right.
So which is why it had to address children.
Right.
Children have to know about their roots, their past, because once they know what how rich are their roots, they'll start feeling pride in it, taking pride in it, and get a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. They are the ones who are going to take this forward.
Right. Interesting. But do you think it is important to have this connect with your past? Like one would argue, right? Why
Yeah.
why do you need to know things? Like, okay, fine, as general knowledge, yes, but maybe the old people should know what the current scenario is and focus more on the current landscape of the city. And like, sure, we would love to know which gods were here or like which leaders were here and the revolutions that happened. And as someone who is like, for me, I'm very curious about why things have happened. That's the reason why it caught my interest. But what about, like, how do you then connect it back to the youth again?
Yeah, so this is my quite a favorite question, because when I started off, my son said this, why do you want to know what the past is gone, finish history, you have to know about today and what's going to happen next. Yeah, but you cannot exist in the abstract. Unless you know your past, you cannot go forward. You're lost. It's like the huge banyan tree. If it didn't have those strong roots, you think it can last like that? And do you think it can, reach up to the skies? You can't. You'll be floating in the nowhere. Unless you know your roots, you cannot have a very strong identity to carry it forward into the future. Unless you know who are you, what is, where do your thoughts
Right.
come from,
Right.
what is it that makes you think or behave in a certain manner, where does it come from? It comes from your past, it comes from your upbringing, it comes from your environment. And I mean, without that, it's like a kite floating without the string.
Right. So, coming back to the construct of the book, can you quickly tell us what all is there in the book? Like the different phases. Let's take a snapshot of, so that our listeners kind of get a insight of what is it that you've spoken in the book. Like I know you've touched upon history, you've touched upon the different personalities, leaders, revolutions, but you've also touched upon a lot of today's aspect, like, the industrial revolution in Pune. Who would have thought at that time? But now you see, like, you have the entire manufacturing industry, you have IT, you have this city has seen so many changes. I would look at it like a thali. Like,
Yeah.
there are so many aspects of it. Each dish can go individually, but it also is beautiful when you eat it together. Like, it's such a diverse plate. And since I am born and brought up, I have a very different connect. I think Pune is a little misunderstood in some ways, because you have a very, how do I put it? You have a very modern thought, like a very global, like my generation or the younger generation, and then you have all the older generation. So I think this book can offer a nice balance and a sweet spot to understand the best of both worlds, because only living in the past doesn't work, and only just living in the present and forgetting where you come from also doesn't work, right? So the misunderstanding happens where do we belong? Do we put one foot here? Do we one foot there? Or what do we do? How do we approach our life as a Punekar? So that's what we want to understand, how you've constructed the chapters, what is there inside.
I think you compared it beautifully to a thali. So that's exactly what it is. It is a mix of a variety of dishes, and yet each one in itself is a very rich one.
Right.
So we decided to follow it in a chronological order, because that makes most sense to a reader. Otherwise if you're going back and forth all the time, then sometimes you tend to get lost. So I mean, most people are surprised to know that there's human presence here 1,000,000 years back.
Really?
Yeah. So, and this is not me saying it, but the scholars, people from Deccan College, archaeologists and everybody has studied that there was human presence here then. And right up to some 3,000-4,000 years back, they find traces of civilization, as in built houses and utensils and a certain way of life being followed, even farming starting to an extent. But what we have in concrete terms is the history of the city going back 2,000 years. I don't know, have you ever heard of a dynasty called the Satavahanas?
In some whispers.
Yeah. So that exactly is the whole point.
That's why we want you to tell us what it is.
Yeah, because the Satavahana dynasty was present here for a good 350 years.
350 years?
Yes, and what was their big contribution? They had extensive trade with the Roman Empire. So the goods landed at the ports. There was no Mumbai city that time. There were only the ports of
Pune
Kalyan.
was before Mumbai?
Oh, much before. I'm telling you, 1,000,000 years. So yeah, Mumbai was just a conglomeration of islands which came together some 300-400 years back.
Right.
It's not that old.
Right.
But there were the ports of Kalyan, Sopara, and the Roman Empire used to trade extensively, and the goods used to land there, and then they came up the ghats to be spread across the state. So they passed through this, what we call Pune. Then it wasn't called Pune, but this is the same region. And how, if you ask me, I can tell you that today you have fantastic traces of this Satavahana presence around Pune. Can you guess what?
No.
No? Yeah, you're born and brought up Pune. So,
Hence,
yeah.
no, nothing.
So the
Guilty as charged.
Karla caves, Bhaje caves, Bedse caves, they are all from the 1st, 2nd century BC, and they were all excavated during the Satavahan period.
Right.
So if you now think back, imagine that people who excavated such caves, that they've lasted 2,000 years. Have you been there?
I've been there in my childhood.
You should go there again and see it with a new perspective, because the sculptures, the architecture, it's mind blowing. Because to reach that level of evolution of architecture, you had to have knowledge of geology. how do you excavate a particular rock?
Right.
You had to have knowledge of mathematics, otherwise you can't do it all in that proportion. It also tells you of the social life of those times. So the jewelry, the dress, and you have the sphinx there, and you have some representation of the centaur. So it all establishes connect with Greece, with Egypt, and the way the
Because of the
people-
trade.
Yeah, correct. So you have royal couples on animals, and the way they are dressed tells you that they were either Greeks or they were Egyptians or something.
Right.
And there are inscriptions which tell you that so and so cave was donated by a traveler or a monk or a farmer or something like
Wow,
that.
interesting.
Yeah, it is fantastic. It's there now for everybody to see.
Right.
So we went from the Satwan era to the next era, and the first time you have the mention of Pune as Punyakatha is in the Rashtrakuta copper plates. So another question, do you know anything of the Rashtrakuta?
No.
No. Presence in Pune.
No. But I do want to know, how did the name Pune come into existence? I'm
Yeah.
guessing this era will answer that.
Yeah, so we can't say how exactly, but the meaning is a pure or punya city, and they must have felt something like that about this. So the copper plates of the Rashtrakutas in the 8th century mention this name,
Right.
and they built or excavated, you can say, the Pataleshwar temple,
Oh.
which is still there. So that's the oldest monument in Pune.
Right.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
so, I mean, all of this is there for us to see if we know about it. If we don't know about it, then we are not going to go and see it. So, from then on, then you have the Yadav era where the extensive temple building, and then you had the Bhakti movement. So, traces of the Bhakti movement, I mean, the saints gave us a lot. I like to tell everybody that we think that the French coined the term liberty, equality, fraternity, but it's actually our saints who gave us this philosophy in the 12th century.
Right.
Because when they started this Wari, which is still on 800 or more years down the line, and this is what they preach, that everybody is equal and there's so much of brotherhood and free to do exactly what they want, and they put it forward through bhakti. So even today when the pilgrims go, you don't know who's a Brahmin or Kshatriya or Hindu or Muslim even, they all go together in that pilgrimage of 250 kilometers
Right.
every single year without break for 800-900 years.
That's something which I think one can say with pride, and it is something only to be understood. You can't read it. You have to go there and you have to live it, and you have to experience it to understand what faith can do, and consistently for so many years. And I think that's a very flagship Pune thing, so to speak.
Yeah,
And of course, it
absolutely,
goes
absolutely.
all across.
Yeah, but like the caves, I mean, I feel very sad when people travel abroad. You should travel abroad. You should see everything the world has to offer and appreciate it. But also look at your home turf sometime. You go and say that, oh, they've preserved a ship which is 400 years old, fantastic. But you have something which is 2000 years old and more fantastic. Why don't you at least go and see it? Because then that's where you'll start feeling, ki, Arey, I'm so rich, I'm so great, I'm fortunate to be here on this
Right.
land. So that's the way the book has been constructed. So from the 12th century and the Bhakti movement, then we go to, of course, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. I mean, he's almost a god man, one single person creating so much of legacy unimaginable, and starting at the age of 16.
Right.
So he gave us all the forts which are around us.
Around us, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, almost 350 forts
Right.
all around, and some very unique technology which is used in fort building.
I want to skip to one part which has really, I'm very curious about it. Like, how did Pune become a? We all know that it's the Oxford of the East. That's what everyone says, and there are so many. Education is such a important aspect of the culture of the city. when did all of this start, and why would it start here? What was the more strategic, so to speak, um, idea to have a cultural hub around here? I mean, yes, of course, through generations and centuries, and how things have unfolded, it could have a connect. But having this as an educational hub, the universities, the culture, the art, literature, all of that. Like, how did this become? Is this a part of your book?
Yeah, of course.
Let's
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, so I take objection to this Oxford of the East, and we've categorically stayed away from it, because I like to believe that Oxford is the Pune of the West. Because our history really goes back a long time. So in the 12th century, there is mention in some text about a saint sending somebody to Pune for learning, for education. So that is the oldest reference we get. But following that, the Peshwas gave huge educational grants for scholars to come here and study. And then there was one Khanderao Dabade who set up a scholarship for scholars to come and study here. And then other factors like the environment and safety, the geographical location,
Right.
and eventually the British coming here and setting up the the Southern Command, and all these confluences together
Made this happen. Made this more
made it into
educational
a hub. But the education legacy was always there. There was the Vedic Pathshala, and the Deccan College was set up, and a whole lot of scholars from all over the country converged into Pune. So it was a natural evolution for Pune to become an educational hub.
Right.
And it's like this, one great institution comes up and then the others see the potential. And so now it is what it is today.
Interesting. I think this is something which everyone should definitely know, because there are so many people who come from outside to study, and I mean, one would again argue, like, someone coming from Delhi, why would he want to know more about the history of Pune? But I think in conversation, when you sit with someone and explain this, I think everyone's interested. It's just the sitting and the explanation
Yeah.
is very important today. Like, I don't think people are averse to it. It's how you reach out
Put
to
it
them
across,
and put it
correct.
across, right? So
Yeah, so it's actually the former Vice Chancellor of Pune University who's written the article on the education section, tracing the whole history and bringing
in
it
the
up.
book?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
And then we had the chairperson of the Maratha Chamber of Commerce writing an article on the industry, the whole evolution. So we can go back to Chhatrapati's era, and that's where the seed was sown, because what you need for industry to develop is, of course, raw material, but an environment which is conducive for industry to grow.
Right.
So that's when it happened, and the Peshwas, Nanasaheb Peshwa, of course, pulled it up to a very large extent, getting coppersmiths and people from elsewhere to work over here and giving them that impetus.
Interesting.
So, and we've jokingly said it in our first chapter that the number of tools found in the prehistoric age in our river beds tell us that there must have been some kind of a tool making factory even at that time.
What do you think the role of the Britishers were here to change the cultural aspect of it? Maybe that played a significant role. Did they preserve it? Did they change it? The education system, of course, changed, because you have a lot of history which is British history, and now it's changing. But because if there is so much of cultural wealth and so much of history which has happened, then there has to be some point where something changed. The trajectory of the city to where it could go versus where, I won't say it is not there in the significance of other cities and important strategic cities, but personally I feel that somewhere there was something which did not you didn't catch the bus just left, and we were like just waiting, like, oh, we have so much to share, we have so much of knowledge, but there's no one to tell our story, or there's no one to take this forward, right? uh, has a British influence affected it?
Of course, the British coming changed a whole lot of things in the whole country. I'm sure you've read the Lord Macaulay's. No?
I haven't.
Okay. So
I am actually the audience for your book.
yeah, exactly. So I'm so happy that
so that's why I'm asking you the question.
No, so Lord Macaulay, when the British came to India and studied the whole ethos. I mean, first they came as traders, but once they had decided that they were here for good, and this was a great place to exploit. So what Lord Macaulay wrote to the Queen, it's a very famous thing now, you can do a Google search and find it, that these people are far ahead of the whole world, and what their backbone is their education system, and that is what we need to crack. And how do we crack it is by introducing English, and once you are in the ruling position you can impose anything. So then English, now I am also talking, we are talking in English, I mean that's the whole world today.
True.
So that is a positive thing, I think, that we have a universal language to communicate in. But what they did was that since everything gradually shifted to English, they made sure that people started feeling that vernacular was inferior. It happened over generations, it didn't happen overnight. There were staunch fighters against it right at the beginning, but slowly then, okay, so if you go to an English medium or you can speak English, then you are up there with the Goras,
right?
And so it changed, and we are all, I mean, living examples of this, that's how it changed, and that's how the belief was ingrained that everything vernacular was inferior. It's only now that people are studying and looking into our history, right? In between some 100, 200 years, nobody knew what we had.
So, if I had to ask you the top 3 things from your book, moments or phases which are definitely worth exploring, what would those be?
Wow, tough question, because
welcome to the podcast.
I've lived this book so much, but I can tell you that page
I will do some reading. Let's
open page number 204.
204.
And before that, let me ask you a question. Do you think there's any architecture worth looking at in Pune?
Yes.
Like for what example?
To be honest, all the Vadas. There is a very interesting brickwork, and the structure of how a Vada is, and you still see some of them. Like, look at this building from outside, like, very typical old building. That is something which captures my attention, but I'm sure there is something.
The Vada architecture is not just to do with the stone and walls, it was the
layout.
The way a family lived.
Right.
The whole setting was such that every member of the family would be involved and had a role to play, and there was a connect without it being,
not like a 3 BHK.
No, exactly. And that is how even, I mean, till your generation, you still have a connect with your grandparents or your great-grandparents. It's not going to happen next.
So is there some significance in this city? Like, are there some famous personalities who introduced something like this here?
The Vada?
The architecture, you're talking about the architecture,
right? So the architecture specifically for Vadas, it was a way of life, but apart from the Vadas, any other architecture?
Well, no, just the university, which was like
so
from
open
the British.
page 204.
204. Okay. Yeah. We have caves, temples, forts of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. We have the Vadas, and we have the British architecture. So it is.
And so many eras.
From 2nd century to the 20th century. Right.
So people come and say, Pune में क्या है देखने के लिए? कुछ भी नहीं है. So then I love to open this page and show them.
I think they would want to eat something here. There is no eatery or no other thing around this. If you have that, then I think people will.
No, but we have a whole section dedicated to
land up
food.
there. That's
But we have a whole section dedicated to food also.
right. So I think this is a very interesting point you made about how the Vadas were designed, because there is always a courtyard in the center and everything is around it, right? And I think very nicely put in terms of how, and that time the families, they were joint families, they were not just 3 or 4, they were like 10 people living. So to integrate that into a more participating, more engaging, involved experience of the family is how
So
it was designed.
spaces were designed with particular purpose, and even the caves also had certain, the Chaityagraha for worship and the viharas to
Right.
live in, and so each thing, even the forts, we have a whole section on the forts of how they are designed and why.
Right.
It's very interesting.
I think that itself is can be a podcast about getting deep diving into the forts and how that worked.
And you should get Khandekar sir for this.
I think we would love to have that conversation. So architecture is one point in
Yeah.
your book which you like. What about the other two?
I think it's what we already talked about is the education and industry. I mean, the traces that go back, the deep roots, and like you asked me, what is it to do with the past? Without that past, industry today in Pune would not have been, not even been what it is today, but just wouldn't have been.
Why is that?
You need to have a culture or an ethos to get where you are. It's like you can't build a building just here on the ground. You need to go deep down into the ground to build a building which is going to be solid and long lasting. So you have to know the traces of where it comes from. Otherwise, anything and everything is going to be very temporary.
Right.
You can be fantastic, great. Say, you said we have not realized the value of where our education system is and whatever. Like, I mean, your generation and even ours to some extent look towards the West for all inspiration. But do you realize that why is it today that the big houses like Google or Microsoft or Apple, for all of them have Indian origin heads, and some of them who've studied in India and gone, not that they've studied there. Why? Somebody has to answer this question. Why? I mean, it's amazing. That is because of our educational system, our DNA, our roots. That's what we are carrying forward to the globe.
Right. Oh, sure. I think that's a interesting point. One of the things which I liked about the book was the chapter on change makers, trailblazers, and thinkers. I think this was significant then, and I think today also we need these change makers and trailblazers for the modern generation to take this forward, right?
So, do you realize the number of firsts Pune has? Girls' education was started by Savitribai Phule in Pune for the whole country. That is the time where it started, modern time. Higher education was started by Dhondo Keshav Karve in Pune. Industry first started in Pune. All the national institutes, like there are 4 institutes dedicated to the study of ancient India, like Deccan College, Bhandarkar Institute, Bharat Itihas Sanshodhak Mandal, and Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith. They are all in Pune. So all the scholars studying that part are in Pune. Then the film industry, the FTI is here, so other film archive, so is the National NCL, National Chemical. Why? Because this is the place that is conducive to the growth of all of this.
Right. And that's why Pune still is a very attractive place for so many people to come, and there's something for everyone.
Yes. And the first lady doctor from India is from Pune. So all the change makers, theatre started here, and the freedom movement wouldn't have had the heft it had without all the thinkers who are from Pune.
Right.
Most of them.
Right. Interesting. So, what is that one thing which you want a youngster today to feel after reading this book? How do we pass the baton? Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. If the baton is not passed in the right way, the connect goes. And there are a lot of evidences of cultural batons being passed from one era to the other. But from a human aspect, from a Punekar of your generation to the Punekar of my generation to the Punekar of the one after, right? What is that one thread which will continue, and how? What is your message through this book to them?
Okay. Before I come to that, before I answer that question, I'd like to just acknowledge that this book is a compilation based on research and hard work done by a lot of scholars from Deccan colleges. I'd especially like to acknowledge Dr. Deglurkar, Dr. Manjiri Khandekar, Dr. Ajit Apte, and Dr. Khandekar. So they all have contributed their knowledge, and it's Kalyani Sardesai who put weave the words in together.
Yes, so we have the credit roles, and I'm going to read that out again for the viewers. So
Yeah.
you have Manjiri Khandekar, who we are having a conversation with. You have Kalyani Sardesai, who has written the book. There is Tejas Modak. I think fantastic job on the illustrations, creative director and
Yeah.
illustrator. Sunil Gokkan, who did the layout and design. Anand Dere with the illustrations. Namrata Khandekar, who contributed to the quiz.
Yeah,
I'm
so
asking
that's
the trivia.
right.
Right.
That will be part of my answer to your next
Okay,
question.
awesome.
Yeah.
Anuradha Kaye, who is admin for Heritage India. Vandana Bolakhe, who does social media management. And the core research team, Professor P.K. Khandekar, Dr. Ajit Apte, and Dr. Manjiri Khandekar. And then special thanks to guest contributors who are Dr. Nitin Karmalkar, Vice Chancellor of Pune, Savitri Phule Pune University. And we have Shri Prashant Girbane, we have Major General N.M. Raskina, we have Ajit Apte, we have Major General Singh, we have Srimati Aditi Atre Peshwa, we have Bapuji Tamane of Junnar for his collections, Christopher Lozado, Dr. Shrikant Zadav, and then the thanks to all the colleges, which is Deccan College of Postgraduate Research Institute, Ferguson College, Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, Bharat Itihas Sanshodak Mandal, Shri Davedeshwar Sansthan, Parvati and Kothurud Pune, Lalit Kala Kendra, Center for Performing Arts, SPPU, and of course Heritage India, who has published this. I think it's important
Thank you so
to
much. Yeah, this is very important
call
because
this out because
yeah.
like Pune has so many aspects, this can only come with all the other aspects which come
Yeah.
together.
Yeah,
It
because
can't be a...
if I'm talking, it's not
s-
that I brought out the book.
No,
but
I mean,
yeah.
Someone has to lead it.
Yeah.
It's like a cricket team, right?
Yeah, so
You
it's
have a
my
captain,
vision,
but
I can
I
take
think
credit for
everyone
that.
needs to do their part.
Yeah.
Um,
So I just answer your last question.
yes.
To take the baton forward. So I think every youngster who is living in Pune, you've chosen the city for a particular reason. Please take the time and effort to get to know your city better. It's doing justice to your city. Once that happens, you'll automatically start getting a sense of belonging and pride and taking care of it. And once it comes here within, you will pass the baton. It's an automatic process. Unless you feel it within you, you can't pass on the baton.
So baton passing is an important thing.
Yeah. So in this book we have the quiz and games section. That's what you asked me about.
Right.
After every era, so you can actually use it as a family book or even amongst friends. So the quiz competition. So you read a chapter and see how much did you absorb of that.
Right.
Or you play a game between 4 people and do a point system.
Right.
So that is a fun way of digesting what the book has to offer.
Right, understood. So I think what I can take back from this personally is that if you want to go forward into the future, you really need to know where you've come from.
Absolutely. I
And
believe that is
one
a
needs
must.
to really join the dots so that there is a sense of belongingness which is prepping for the adaptation of the future as well.
Correct.
Both have to work together. It can't be in
Correct.
isolation. You can't be too stuck in the past and you can't be just randomly going into the future. There has to be a centeredness to all of this, which is a combination, which is what our country is actually. It's not just
Correct.
about Pune, so to speak. Like you
No.
go everywhere, there is always this cultural DNA or something in spirit which brings the nation together.
Correct.
It's crazy
I mean,
because
just 22 official languages, so
it's
many different ways
it's
of saying, but
amazing how this country comes together.
absolutely.
No matter what happens, there is something in our DNA wherein the poorest of poor and the richest of richest, somewhere they all align. And how it happens, what happens, we are blessed with this.
This happens
culture and
because
DNA.
of our roots.
And the roots need to be celebrated more and more. And as technology is becoming more relevant, and as we are talking more about the future, the past voice is reducing. So I think that needs to be dialed up equally loudly to be able to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
celebrated, to acknowledge what's coming ahead for us.
So,
Otherwise,
because if you just study this, and analyze anybody or anything that's come up spur of the moment and done fantastically well, doesn't have the lasting
the
power.
longevity.
Yeah. So when we are talking about a sustainable civilization today, India is given the best model. Through everything, we are doing fantastically well.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and this is something which has to. Everyone should be a flag bearer of this thought. It's not just Heritage India. I think as a citizen, and one of the
Yes.
reasons why we wanted this to have this conversation is because one is the relevance of books today. We need to have the youngsters have more access to books. One of the things which, as a culture in Book Bar, is all these are pre-loved books, right? So we are encouraging people to come and read. It doesn't matter, you can sit for hours and hours and read, no problem. Yeah, sure, you should have a coffee at least.
Yeah.
But that's how business works. But
Yeah.
the
So this
idea,
will serve you great. You should encourage it as a
100%,
game.
and we would
as
love
a
to-
game, not just read it. Play a game with it and see what
definitely, I
happens.
think this will definitely land with a lot of youngsters who come here. Quick thing on how are you selling this online? How does one buy a book? Definitely, people will come here and we'll point them to the right direction. Just for our viewers, so that we can link up everything. And
It is actually available on Amazon.
oh, it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
What's the
otherwise,
price for it?
The retail price, MRP is 3,000,
Right.
and the Amazon one is being sold by one of the distributors.
Okay. So they have their own price on Amazon.
Yeah, they have their own price.
Okay.
But if somebody comes to us and it's available with us, can offer it at a discount
Right.
directly. So can give my number or give.
Definitely.
That's all.
I think we've come to the end of the conversation. I would love to have more. I would love to have a longer conversation, but I think our
Yeah.
battery is also going to go.
No, but it's been a very interesting conversation.
But I think
And,
what we don't do usually, because we don't have an audience, and since we have an audience here, we could have the audience ask you a few questions, just as a to
yeah,
further
you may
this,
or
and
not, may not.
your friends, your cheerleaders, your colleagues.
Yeah, I'm extremely
they
grateful
all have
for
seen
to
your
all of them
journey
to have come here.
all throughout, and
Yeah.
if you have any questions, please.
No, they are as involved in the process.
Absolutely.
We are just so appreciative of Manjiri for putting Pune, it was always on the map, to magnify, let's say, to amplify the importance of Pune to every reader and who will now come and have a look at this book in your book bar. I think she's done a great job of bringing Pune to the table.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, he has been promoting the book.
I remember that this idea took place in France, when we were with, she's a French teacher as well. So when we were traveling to one place and she saw a stone there and all the French were going gaga about it, she said, we have so much in our country, I want to showcase it to the world. That was when she told me in the train, and it was about 15-20 years ago.
20 years back.
And she realized it with her own hard work, dedication, putting in her own money, blood, sweat and tears, and the help of everyone else. So we are very proud of
No, and
Manjiri and
I can't take this. I mean, I couldn't have achieved what I did and can't take this forward without Vandan and Anuradha, who have been my
Part of your team.
two arms. Yeah.
So-
Yeah, and I can say to our readers that
Leave her dream. Yes.
No, so I think it only makes sense after talking to you, after understanding Punyakatha, after hearing everyone, and also understanding the importance of celebrating history and heritage, especially in the country.
Celebrating
Your
our
voice
roots,
should
our roots.
your voice should be louder now.
you help us.
You know.
This is the first
No,
step.
I mean my point is that that's how it works. I mean this is a service, so to speak. Like there is
Yeah,
never
it
a
is,
return
it
in
is.
service if you look
Yeah.
at it spiritually or philosophically, right? It is a service. I mean,
Yeah. It's a
and
mental
I think it should continue.
satisfaction.
I think it's a very important aspect of
So our next offering is a book on Maharashtra,
right.
which is coming end of this year.
Right. So I think for our readers, listeners, go on to Heritage India Communications, their website, their social media. You guys can follow the work which they are doing, participate, celebrate the roots. But one thing I want to ask, and it's slightly on the con side.
Yeah.
What is it that has hampered Pune, so to speak? While there is so much beauty, this has to be articulated in terms of the things which have not let us grow.
So influx of too many people and unplanned expansion, lack of infrastructure to match up with the growth.
No, but
Is
so I'll redirect my question.
Okay.
More from a heritage point of view, more from a cultural point of view. I mean, you have so many institutes, as you mentioned, but people don't know. And I don't think everyone is averse to celebrating it. If you don't know, you don't know. And if you
The
don't
whole
know, you
point.
won't
That is
celebrate
the-
it, right?
that
It's
is
like
the whole
that.
point of Heritage India being set up, that you create awareness, because if you don't know, you're not aware
But
it
are
exists.
people in Pune lost? The baton hasn't been passed in the right sense. Is that the loophole? Because I often wonder, culturally, say, if you meet someone from the past, or say your generation, there's always a resistance to want to also adapt to the modern times. Old people also need to adapt to the changing times, right? And somewhere in that, there is no transfer of baton. Somewhere it is like, okay, our generation did it this way, you guys don't know what to do. That's not solving anything, right? Because you all want to keep it protected, assuming that the other person will or will not take it in the right way, and then somewhere there is a loss in translation, right? So from a generation to generation passing of the baton, do you think that there is a gap there? It's not only about the youngsters, it's also about how they have been conditioned by the earlier generation. Do you think there is scope of improvement there?
Yeah, of course there is scope of improvement, but the improvement has to come from both sides, because while the previous generation sticks to what they believe in, that is because that is what they have known. They have not known anything. So while they will make attempts, and they do, all of us do, to understand and adapt to the younger generation, it has to also come both ways. That the younger generation also has to understand that we come from a different place, and so for us to see the new place, we need to be taken into that.
Right.
Yeah. We can't just be told that now this is changed, so you better accept it. It can't happen so easily.
Right? I hope that the young can meet the elderly
And
at
it's
a very
not
nice
just
point, maybe at
young.
at book bar on a table where this
Yeah,
is exactly
this is
what
the
it is,
exact
right?
space,
One
yeah.
generation to the other generation,
Yeah, yeah.
passing the baton and taking this culturally forward. So thank you for this conversation.
Thank you so much for
we
calling me
we
and
we always
giving me
love to
opportunity to say
build
all this.
community and
So,
more importantly
yeah,
to
so I
celebrate
hope that
this
a lot
book.
of people, yeah.
Folks, Punyakatha, check it out at Book Bar and check it out on Amazon, and proud to be a part of this city, and hopefully we'll empower others, and
Thank you.